This video is brought to you by patreon.com/worsttake. Get access to exclusive live streams and Discord servers, on-screen shoutouts, and early access to some videos when you join now. Help make sure that we can continue to make content like this by supporting the Patreon. Links are in the description down below. David NJOKU's career as a Cleveland Browns has been through a ton of ups and downs, from a promising rookie year to being buried on the depth chart below Harrison Bryant to requesting a trade, and now to one of the premier still young tight ends in all of football. So how did we get here with David? Well, let's take a look back. And to start with David NJOKU is pretty simple, right? It's not that obscure of a story. He was a rookie who had a promising year in 2017, despite the fact that the Browns were abysmal that year. That was the year the Browns won no games. Well, yeah, no games in 2017. They were winless. And, you know, you roll into 2018, David NJOKU has 600 yards. Everything looks like it's on track for him to have a pretty promising third season. And that was kind of the vibe in general with the Browns in period. Going from 2018, the offseason from 2018 going into 2019 was an extreme period of optimism that Browns fans have not seen in the reactivation era, right, since coming back in 1999. Browns fans were optimistic about the quarterback position. The #1 overall pick, Baker Mayfield, had a promising rookie year in 2018 and looked to build off of that. Not only did they look to build off of that, John Dorsey, who most of Cleveland had a positive reputation of at the time, went out and traded for Odell Beckham Jr., who at the time was seen as a top 5 receiver on track to break some of Jerry Rice's records. Now, obviously that didn't pan out for Odell, but that's where we were, and that's the kind of caliber of player Odell Beckham was when he got traded to the Cleveland Browns. This team was full of optimism. Optimism at the quarterback position, optimism on the defensive side because you still have Myles Garrett, optimism from the receiving end because you have David NJOKU, who looks to make a step. You have Odell Beckham, you have Jarvis Landry, and look, it sounds crazy now, but at the time, people were like, and you brought back Freddie Kitchens, who was the architect of what we thought was a good 8 weeks in Cleveland, and people felt like that was going to be it. Like this team was ready to make the jump. And 2018 to me feels like the roaring 20s, right? In the 20s, before the Great Depression, there was this small period where it felt like economically everything was going to be fine with a young United States of America. Everybody was happy, spending money. It was prohibition going on, a bunch of bad stuff going on underneath it, obviously Jim Crow laws and things like that. But economically, people thought that they were going to have a good time. Then the Great Depression happened, and all that good time stopped. And the Great Depression for the Cleveland Browns was 2019, because all that optimism that they had in 2018 just died in 2019. It was bad. 2019 was not just supposed to be the breakout year for David NJOKU. It was supposed to be the breakout year for the Browns. Baker Mayfield was given a top 5 receiver and Odell Beckham to pair along with an already strong receiving group that included David NJOKU and Jarvis Landry. And the ideal was that having Odell Beckham and Jarvis Landry on the field at the same time, along with Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt, who you would have for a full season. Remember, the Browns picked up Kareem Hunt in the middle of the 2019 season. Then I believe Kareem Hunt had to serve a suspension on top of that. So now you're getting Chubb and Hunt for a full year. You're getting Odell Beckham on top of a decent wide receiving room. You're getting Baker Mayfield more weapons. You're going to free up some space for David NJOKU. It was supposed to be a breakout year for this team for all of those reasons. David NJOKU was supposed to be one of the biggest beneficiaries of all of these things. But it didn't go that way for David, nor did it go that way for the Cleveland Browns. We all know the Cleveland Browns had a disappointing season, but this video is focused on David NJOKU. And David NJOKU, not only did he get injured, he played 5 games. But in those 5 games, he was horribly disappointing, only getting 41 total yards in 5 games. And even worse, of those 41 total yards, he had a 50% catch percentage and a sub 60 blocking rate. He was objectively bad in 2019. And after that season, his stock was at an all-time low. There was a new GM that did not draft him in Andrew Berry. There's a new head coach who was not a part of the staff that drafted him, like Freddie Kitchens was, and Kevin Stefanski. And all of this was changing around him. To make matters worse, one of the Browns' first moves was to get Austin Hooper, who was a big free agent contract at the time. And also, they spent a day 2 pick on Harrison Bryant, a day 2 or 4th round pick on Harrison Bryant. And NJOKU saw the writing on the wall, right? He saw that they were getting more tight ends. He saw that there was a new head coach who was not a part of the staff that brought him in. He saw that there was a new general manager who was not the guy who made the call to bring him in. And the writing might be on the wall. And for plenty of Browns players, this has been the story of them, right? So many Browns players have been the victim of the constant musical chairs that this team has played with front office and coaching moves, right? Coaches come in, they want new players. They get rid of old draft picks. Those guys never get to develop because they were somebody else's draft picks, so on and so forth. And he saw what the history was with the team and what the writing was on the wall. He knew what the story was going to be. And to show you how low David NJOKU's stock was at the time, here's a segment from my show talking about David NJOKU in the summer before the 2020 season.
David NJOKU's career has gone down one of the steepest slides I have ever seen in recent memory for a player who was regarded to be a young gem just a year before, and now we're wondering if the Browns could even get anything in value for a trade for him. And something happened. Something had to have happened with David NJOKU. And I'm not quite sure what it was. Maybe it was an attitude thing. Maybe it was something that went down with David NJOKU. Maybe it was another injury concern with him. But something clearly went down between week 2 and week 14 with David NJOKU. Because one, it took forever for him to come back, despite him stating, I believe since week 10, that he was ready to come back when he was eligible to come back off IR. And then when he finally was cleared to come back in week 14, he barely did anything. And why in the world would David NJOKU request a trade to begin with? And to me, I think this is the most obvious thing in the entire situation, quite frankly. I think David NJOKU woke up after the draft, saw that Harrison Bryant was on his team on top of Austin Hooper, saw that his position would be tight end too. He's probably somebody who's slightly self-reflective at the very least and knows his flaws as a football player are blocking and catching, and realized pretty quickly that he might not be the fit that this team is looking for at tight end too. And I still contend that that is the case. And I think he saw a situation where like he could easily become the 3rd tight end, or like a special package tight end where he just doesn't get the touches that he thinks he should be able to get paid the money that he wants to get after his rookie deal. And he and Drew Rosenhaus hit the panic button. The fact that it's been rescinded is significant because I don't remember a situation like this ever happening with Cleveland Browns management. And also just normally when a player requests a trade publicly, trade's imminent. That it just happens, even when it's a player not worthy of trading.
He was a bad catcher at the football and a horrible blocker. And honestly, I stand by my analysis of him at that point of his career because that's what it was. As promising as 2017 and 2018 were, 2019 was devastating for your belief in David NJOKU. It was that bad. 41 yards in 5 games is flat out terrible, with one of the worst catch percentages in the NFL, while also being a liability as a blocker. One of the main reasons people felt like he wasn't going to see the field that much with Harrison Bryant and Austin Hooper was if he was a second tight end, that would mean he would have to learn how to block. And David NJOKU hadn't shown an interest in learning how to block his entire career up until that point. So it wasn't a good bet that he would come in to fit that role. But his grind back to promise, right, to being a promising prospect was a slow grind. It did not happen overnight. It happened with him choosing individual things to get better at and getting time and time again to prove that he's getting better at those things. He requested that trade in 2020, the summer of 2020. He did not get that trade request. The Browns rescinded it, told him that they're not going to trade him, told him he's going to be on this team. And he was basically the third tight end on the team in 2020. He was behind Harrison Bryant in targets. He was behind Austin Hooper in targets. But that didn't stop David Njoku from developing, right? He could have made the personal decision to check out, but David saw this as a challenge to get better. And what happened was when they threw him the ball, albeit less times than it had been before, he caught it more often. His catch percentage went up significantly from one of the worst in the NFL to one of the best in the NFL. Another thing that jumped up significantly was his blocking. Seemed like he started to take blocking serious. And in less than a year, he went from one of the worst blockers on the team to one of the better blockers on the team. And that really kept him alive and being able to stay on the team. 2021 was more of the same. He was still behind Harrison Bryant, well, not Harrison Bryant, but Austin Hooper on the depth chart and in the pecking order. But he continued to show more and more promise. 2022 was when he was back to being a prominent prospect. He showed that he has the ability to get like 600 yards as a tight end, and the Browns rewarded him with the contract extension. The contract extension that at that point was still controversial, despite the fact that David Njoku had shown slowly but surely 2 years of development and growth under the Cleveland Browns system, and that the Browns were starting to trust him more. Now, 2022 was his return to promise. 2023 was when David Njoku finally fulfilled some of that potential that we saw in him when the Browns drafted him in the first round in 2017. It took a while to get here, right? Almost 5 to 6 seasons to get here. But 2013 was the season that we had all been hoping David Njoku would be capable of. He was one of the best yak tight ends. He was one of the best tight ends in football, period. He was lethal as a blocker, both in run and pass blocking, but he was also even more lethal as a weapon, as a explosive play guy. Just look at his game versus the Jets. He had multiple games where he was pretty much unstoppable after the ball got in his hands. He damn right looked like Derrick Henry, and now he's here. The Browns took the long way to get here. Or not the long way, but they had to take the long way to get here, right? David Njoku was not somebody who was going to be developed overnight. There were some missteps. There were some things that he personally needed to fix. There were some things that needed to get fixed around him in order to get to this point. But that brings me to why I think David Njoku's development is important. The reason his development is important is not just because the Browns were able to get a good tight end under decent money. It says much more about the organization. His development is a direct reward of the changes that this organization has made since 2020. Let's go back to the summer of 2020 when the Browns were at that fork in the road. The decision they made with David Njoku not to bend to his trade request and to tell him that we're going to develop you, we're not going to trade you, set the tone for how they would handle prospects and conflicts going forward. The Browns are known as a team that, hey, just because you ask for a trade doesn't mean you're going to get it. They've done this multiple times with multiple players. They're going to figure out a way to work it out, and they're going to try to get the best out of you. We saw this with Kareem Hunt, who wanted to get traded a couple of years ago. He's still on the team somehow. But that set the tone for how the Browns would handle things. And also, they made a very different decision with David and his development than decisions that they have made for the last 20 years. The Browns were a team obsessed with the shortcut. Like all those GMs, all those coaches, all they had in common, from basically everybody who was hired on the GM side up to Sashi Brown, even after Sashi Brown, because John Dorsey definitely fits this description, and pretty much every coach until Kevin Stefanski, obsessed with the shortcut. How can we get to this amount of wins in the quickest way possible? And in searching for those shortcuts, the Browns have lost plenty of talented players like David NJOKU because, oh, I didn't draft him. Let me get somebody I'm familiar with to replace this guy. Yeah, the ceiling might be lower, but he's going to be what I need him to be day one. I'm not going to waste time developing a guy like David NJOKU, like Grant Delpit, like Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. I need on, right? Players who might have struggled a bit early in their career, but the Browns wait out until they're productive players. They're probably going to do the same thing with Jerome Ford, who shows some promise, but definitely needs a little bit more time in the oven before he's ready. You can also say the same thing's probably true for a guy like DTR, who's a developmental quarterback prospect right now, who's not necessarily ready for prime time, but they do see some signs in him that might point to him being a productive player in some capacity in the NFL. They're going to take their time with these things. They didn't used to do that, and that used to cost them young player at the young player. How many times have you, as a Browns fan, been watching a random NFL game and see somebody like Tashawn Gibson pop up and be like, man, I wish we could still have him? Or when TJ Ward was killing it on the Denver Broncos, you wish you could have kept him. Or when you had to see Alex Mack be the center, one of the best centers in the NFL for the Falcons, or you had to see Mitchell Schwartz win Super Bowls with the Kansas City Chiefs, and you wondered to yourself, why couldn't we figured it out? Why couldn't we have gotten it out? Because this team for years chose to be impatient, chose the quick reward. But David NJOKU is a result of a very different process, a process that took several GMs, a process that took several head coaches, I believe 3 head coaches in David NJOKU's career, and the patience of the third GM and coach is really what pushed this thing over the top to get him where he needed to be. This required patience, this required time, this required continuity, this required a lot of work. A lot of people, a lot of teams would have cut or traded David NJOKU in the summer of 2020, and really nobody would have looked any way about it. But the Browns didn't make that choice. They didn't take the shortcut. They decided to take the long way. And now they have one of the better tight ends in football. David NJOKU's development is a result of the changes this organization has made and why this Browns team has been significantly better in the last 4 years than they have at any point since coming back in 1999. Now, that's not the bar that you want to measure everything against. Obviously, you want to measure against the rest of the NFL. But for a franchise that spent most of its existence since coming back at the very bottom of NFL teams, that is a significant hurdle to clear. The Browns have cleared that hurdle because of their patience with young players, because of their ability to wait it out, because of their ability to draft good young players and sign good young players. They have gotten themselves out of that bottom tier conversation with the NFL and put themselves squarely in the upper middle pack of the NFL. Now it's time for them to break out. But to appreciate how we got here is important. In David NJOKU's development, and how that set the tone for the Browns going forward, being that David NJOKU was really the first crisis that this franchise, well, not franchise, this organization headed by Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Berry had to deal with, really did set the tone for the rest of it. That's why I think David NJOKU's development is probably one of the most important things of recent Browns history. But let me know what you think in the comment section down below. Y'all have a great day. Have an even better night. Peace.